Hassan had just finished his morning tour at the palace square. The sun was warm, and the sky was clear. It was a perfect day for tourists. People laughed, clicked pictures, and asked him questions about the palace's history. Hassan answered them with his usual gentle smile and deep knowledge. He had been a tour guide for more than 10 years, and many people admired the way he spoke with respect, calmness, and love for his culture. After the group left, Hassan walked to a small bench under a tree. His 10-year-old son, Amir, waved at him from a short distance. Amir had finished his school early that day and had come to see his father. This was their daily routine. Hassan would give tours, and then they would walk home together, sometimes stopping by the bookshop or the bakery. Just as Hassan was about to lift his hand to wave back, something unusual happened. 3 men in royal guard uniforms walked towards him quickly, but without any noise. Their faces were serious. Atiya, they did not shout. They did not even ask for his name. One of them gently held Hassan's arm. The other 2 stood by his side. The crowd that had just been walking around started to stop and look. It was clear that something strange was happening, but the guards didn't say a word. Hassan looked at them, confused. "Is there some mistake?" he asked softly, trying not to panic. The guards didn't respond. They only nodded slightly, signaling him to walk with them. Hassan looked around. People were staring, whispering, pulling out their phones, and Amir was still standing across the street, eyes wide, not understanding what was happening. "Please," Hassan said again, this time more worried. "I have my son right there. Can someone tell me what's going on?" The guards still didn't answer. One of them raised a hand toward the boy, silently signaling him to stay back. Amir didn't move. He looked frozen, like he didn't know whether to cry or run. Hassan's heart began to beat faster, not because he feared he had done something wrong, but because he had no idea why he was being taken away, and, more importantly, who would take care of Amir if something happened. They led him slowly through the side gate of the palace, avoiding the main road. It was quiet. No force was used, but the silence of the guards made everything feel heavier. Hassan kept trying to speak. "I work here. I've done nothing wrong. I've never been involved in anything bad. I only talk about history and help visitors." Still no response. They brought him to a small building near the palace grounds, usually meant for administrative work. Hassan had passed by it many times, but had never been inside. It looked simple on the outside, but inside it was cool, clean, and very quiet. The walls were white, and the windows had thick curtains. The guards gently asked him, with a hand signal, to sit down on a wooden chair in a small room. One of them brought a glass of water and placed it in front of him. Another guard left and closed the door behind him, while the third stood silently near the wall. Hassan looked around the room. There was a table, 2 chairs, a clock, and a camera in the corner. No one was asking him questions. No one was accusing him of anything, but no one was telling him what was going on either. It was like being in the middle of a story without knowing the beginning. He sat quietly, thinking about every possible reason why this could happen. Did someone use his name for something? Was this a mistake? Did someone lie about him? Or was there someone else with the same name? But in his heart, Hassan knew he had done nothing wrong. His life was simple. He lived in a small apartment with Amir. His wife had passed away 4 years ago, and since then, all he did was work hard, raise his son, stay away from anything that could cause trouble. Hassan had guided people from all over the world, teachers, families, even foreign diplomats, and many of them had written kind reviews about him online. Some had even gifted him books or postcards to thank him. He couldn't understand how a man with such a peaceful life could suddenly be pulled into something so serious. He thought about Amir, still waiting outside, not knowing if his father would return home tonight. Hassan closed his eyes for a moment. and took a deep breath. He had taught Amir that no matter how bad things look, one should remain calm, honest, and respectful. This was his chance to show that lesson through actions. Time passed slowly. The clock on the wall ticked, but no one came. The guard still stood silently, not looking at him, not speaking. Hassan sipped the water and tried to keep his hands from shaking. Outside, the news of the arrest began to spread. People who had been in the square started posting about it online. A few of them had recognized Hassan. Why was the kind tour guide taken away? Someone wrote. He always smiled and shared stories about the city. He was arrested today, but he looked confused. A young reporter named Layla, who had once interviewed Hassan for a cultural story, saw the posts and felt something was off. She remembered how polite and wise he was. She decided to visit the square and ask around. Meanwhile, Amir had been taken to a palace security area nearby, where a female officer kindly offered him juice and a seat. "Father is safe," she told him gently. "We're just checking something." But the boy didn't feel safe. He had never seen his father look so helpless before. He didn't understand why the guards didn't say anything, and why they had taken him away in front of so many people. Back in the small room, Hassan remained seated. He was tired, but not angry. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't beg. He just waited, hoping that the truth, whatever it was, would come out soon. The silence of the guards wasn't rude, but it was heavy. It felt like they were carrying a big secret, but weren't allowed to share it. Hassan wondered if speaking more would help, or if staying quiet was the better choice. Eventually, footsteps were heard outside the room. The door opened. More people had arrived. But that moment, that pause, right before the door opened, was the turning point, because what happened next would change everything for Hassan and Amir. Hassan sat quietly in the small room. Time seemed to move slowly, as if the clock on the wall had decided to take a rest. The silence around him was deep, but his thoughts were loud. His mind kept going back and forth, trying to understand what had happened. Why had he been taken away so suddenly? Why were the royal guards so silent? And what would happen next? He looked around the room again. Nothing had changed. The same chair, the same table, the same calm-faced guard standing near the wall. Hassan wondered if he was being watched. Maybe someone behind a glass window or camera was observing him, studying his every move. Still, he sat straight, keeping his hands folded neatly in his lap. He knew that showing anger or fear wouldn't help. He remembered what his father used to say, "When the world goes quiet, let your patience speak." While he waited, Hassan began to think about his life. Maybe, if he looked at it carefully, he could find something that connected to this strange situation. He started from the beginning. He was born in a small village outside the city. His family was simple farmers with big hearts and small dreams. They didn't have much, but they had strong values. His parents had always taught him the importance of honesty, kindness, and hard work. When he was a child, Hassan would sit under the big tree near their house and listen to his grandfather's stories. That's where his love for history began. Later, Hassan moved to the city to study. It wasn't easy. He worked part-time jobs, washing dishes in hotels, helping in bookshops, just to pay for his classes. He studied history and language. Loved learning about ancient kings, beautiful buildings, and the art of storytelling. People said he had a way with words. When he spoke, even the birds seemed to pause and listen. After finishing his studies, Hassan became a tour guide. He never became rich, but he became known. His tours were special, not because he used big words, but because he made people feel the past. He would describe a palace window as if a queen had just looked out of it. He would speak about stones and walls as if they had hearts and memories. Then came the happiest and hardest parts of his life. He got married to a kind woman named Sana. She was a teacher, gentle and wise. Together, they had Amir. For a few years, life was peaceful. But Sana fell sick, and despite all efforts, she passed away. Hassan was heartbroken, but he promised her he would raise Amir with love, strength, and values. Since then, his world had been small, but meaningful. Wake up early, prepare Amir for school, give tours during the day, return home before sunset, cook dinner, help Amir with his homework, and sleep. Day after day. No shortcuts, no secrets, and now, here he was, sitting in a guarded room for no reason he could understand. He began to think of the faces he had seen on tours, travelers, students, even officials. Could someone have misunderstood him? Did he say something wrong without realizing it? Or maybe someone had used his name in a wrong way. He wished someone would just tell him what this was all about. Meanwhile, inside that quiet room, things were starting to change. The palace staff had begun to talk. A few of them had known Hassan from his tours. One of the cooks had attended one of his storytelling sessions. A young receptionist remembered how Hassan once helped an old tourist who had lost her way. People were starting to feel that something wasn't right. At the same time, Amir sat with the kind officer in the nearby waiting room. The woman had given him juice and a storybook, but Amir didn't touch either. He just kept looking at the door, hoping it would open and his father would walk through. He kept thinking about how the guards had stayed silent, how they had not even looked angry, only serious. He remembered his father once telling him, "Someone doesn't speak, it doesn't always mean they are angry. Sometimes silence means they're thinking carefully." Amir hoped that was true now. In another part of the city, Layla K., the journalist who had once written an article about Hassan, was digging through her notes. She found the old interview, a short piece titled, "The Man Who Makes History Come Alive." It had received many kind comments. People had praised Hassan's passion and honesty. Layla read the article again, then opened her laptop and began to type a new post. Many of you might remember Hassan, the tour guide who brings stories to life. Today, I learned he was taken away by palace guards. No one knows why, but I know. This man, he doesn't deserve this. Hope someone speaks up soon. The post started to spread quickly. People shared their own memories of Hassan, how he helped their parents, how he guided their children, how he never asked for tips but always smiled. The internet began to ask the same question. Why was he taken? Back in the room, Hassan continued to wait. At one point, the guard brought him another glass of water and placed a small plate with bread beside it. Hassan nodded in thanks, though the guard didn't reply. Hassan didn't feel hungry, but he understood this was not punishment. The guards weren't treating him harshly, They were just following orders, and those orders were silent. He thought about how easy it would be to become angry, to demand answers, to shout. But what would that change? He trusted that the truth would find its way. He looked at the closed door. Somewhere behind it, people must be talking. Files must be moving. Questions must be asked. He whispered to himself, "The truth is patient." And so am I that evening. The sun began to set. The light coming through the window turned orange. Hassan stood up and stretched a little. The guard didn't stop him. He walked slowly to the window and looked outside. He couldn't see city, but he could feel it. The sounds of people, cars, life moving on. Then, just as he turned back to his chair, he heard soft footsteps in the hallway. The sound was different this time. More people, slower steps, and a calm but serious energy. The door handle turned dot. The door opened gently, and a group of people entered. One of them wore a formal coat. His eyes were kind but focused. Another one held a file. But the face that caught Hassan's attention the most was someone from his past. Someone he had not seen in years. It was Faisal, a childhood friend from his village, now working inside the palace as part of the advisory staff. Faisal looked at Hassan with a mix of surprise and relief. "Hassan," he said softly, "we need to talk. There has been a mistake." That one line gave Hassan hope. Something was finally moving. Someone was finally speaking. Everything was about to change. Hassan stood quietly as his old friend Faisal walked into the room. There was a strange mix of feelings inside him: surprise, relief, confusion, and a little bit of hope. Faisal looked different now, dressed in formal palace clothes, holding a file and walking with the calmness of someone who had seen the inside world of power and responsibility. The other men in the room stepped back slightly, giving Faisal space. Hassan could see that Faisal was not just another visitor. He was someone important now. Faisal walked straight to him and gently put a hand on Hassan's shoulder. "You're still the same," he said with a soft smile. "Still calm, still patient." Hassan gave a small smile, but the weight of silence still sat in the room. "Can you please tell me what this is about?" he asked. Faisal nodded and pulled a chair for him. "Yes, Hassan, that's why I'm here. I need to explain something that should have never happened." He opened the file and placed it on the table between them. There were a few papers, a photograph, and some printed reports. For the past few weeks, Faisal began, the palace security team has been tracking someone involved in a secret smuggling case. This person has been moving small historical items out of the country: old coins, rare scrolls, and ancient objects that belong to our nation. Hassan listened quietly. He didn't interrupt. He wanted to hear the full story. "We received information," Faisal continued, "about this person's movements, and we had a description of the suspect. He is about your height, your age, and ... Faisal paused and turned one of the photos toward Hassan. "He looks almost exactly like you." Hassan looked at the photo. For a moment, even he was shocked. The man in the photo had similar eyes, a similar beard, and even wore the same kind of clothes Hassan usually wore during his tours. Anyone could have made the mistake. "This is him?" Hassan asked. Faisal nodded. "Yes, when the guards saw you today and matched you to the file, they acted immediately. They were told not to speak until the identity was confirmed. That's part of the rules in higher-risk investigations. That's why they stayed silent. It was not personal." Hassan took a deep breath. Things were starting to make sense now. "Okay, so it was a misunderstanding. A serious one," Faisal said. "And we are truly sorry for it." Then another officer entered the room with a tablet in hand. He quietly placed it on the table and played a short video clip. It showed a security camera recording from one of the palace gates. The man from the photo was there, walking quickly, speaking to someone holding a bag. His voice wasn't clear, but it was enough to confirm that he was not Hassan. Faisal turned the screen toward the guard who had been standing in the room all along. The guard looked closely, then gave a small nod. He now understood the mistake. We just received this footage an hour ago," Faisal explained. "It proves that the real suspect was in another part of the city when you were giving your tour." Hassan sat back, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. "So, what happens now?" "We clear your name," Faisal said firmly, "and more than that, we thank you. You stayed calm, respectful, and patient during all of this. You showed more strength than many people ever could." Hassan didn't say much, was just thinking about his son, Amir. "Where's my boy?" he asked. "He's nearby," Faisal assured him. "He's safe. We had an officer stay with him. Would you like to see him now?" Hassan nodded quickly. Within minutes, the door opened again, and little Amir ran into the room. Soon as he saw his father, he ran straight into his arms. Hassan bent down and hugged him tightly, closing his eyes, grateful that the worst part was over. "I thought they took you away forever," Amir said softly. "No, my son," Hassan replied gently. "I'm right here. We're going home together." Faisal watched the scene silently, then stepped out of the room to give them privacy. Outside the palace building, news was moving fast. Layla's post had been shared hundreds of times. Many people had commented, asking for updates, wanting to know what happened to the kind man who told them stories of the past. Some even offered legal help. One person wrote, "If Hassan is guilty, I'll eat my shoe. This man once helped me find my lost mother in a market crowd." In the communication room of the palace, officials had now realized the seriousness of their error. It was not just a small mistake. A respected man's name had been tied to something serious, even if only for a short time. His reputation had been touched, his peace had been disturbed, and most importantly, his child had been scared. A meeting was quickly arranged by the internal affairs team. They agreed that Hassan's name had to be cleared publicly. And more than that, they wanted to honor his calmness and dignity. Back in the small room, Faisal returned with 2 papers in hand. "Hassan," he said, "we would like to offer you a formal apology letter. This is from the palace, signed by the Chief of Security." Hassan took the letter and read it slowly. The words were polite and respectful. They admitted the mistake and thanked him for his understanding. "The second letter," Faisal continued, "is a small invitation. We are holding a cultural event next week. Many leaders will attend. We would like you to be the guest speaker." "Me?" Hassan asked, surprised. "Yes," Faisal smiled. "We want you to tell your story. It's not just about what happened today, but also about your work, how you teach people history through your words. We want the world to know who you really are." Hassan looked down at Amir, then back at Faisal. "I'll think about it," he said, kindly. "But right now, I just want to go home." "Okay, you should," Faisal said, placing a hand on his shoulder again. "You've already shown great courage. Let's make sure your story is told the right way." As they walked out of the palace gate, Hassan felt the cool evening breeze on his face. Amir held his hand tightly. Some of the guards near the gate gave small, respectful nods. The same silence that had once felt cold and confusing now felt respectful and calm. Outside the palace wall, few reporters had gathered. Layla was among them. When she saw Hassan, she didn't ask questions. She simply raised her camera, took one photo of him holding Amir's hand, smiled. That photo would be seen by thousands of people the next morning, and slowly, the world would begin to learn what really happened, not through shouting, but through quiet truth and steady dignity. The next morning, the sun rose gently over the city. The sky was a mix of soft blue and golden light, and a new day had begun. But for Hassan, this day felt different. It wasn't just another morning, it was the beginning of a new chapter. In his life, he sat on the balcony of his small home, sipping tea while Amir played quietly with his toy car nearby. Birds chirped on the power lines. Everything felt peaceful again. But even with this calm, Hassan knew the past day had left a mark on his heart. The questions, the silence, the confusion, all of it had shaken him in ways he hadn't shown. He looked at Amir and smiled. "Are you okay now?" he asked. Amir nodded. "Yes, Baba. But I didn't like that place. I thought we wouldn't come back home." Hassan gently pulled his son closer and said, "Sometimes things happen that we don't understand right away. But truth always finds its way." Amir rested his head on his father's arm. "Okay? Are they going to say sorry too?" "Everyone," Hassan thought for a moment. "They already have. But now, it's our turn to show that we can forgive and move on." Later that day, a black car pulled up outside Hassan's home. A polite driver stepped out and handed him a sealed envelope. It was an official invitation for the cultural event at the royal palace, the same one Faisal had mentioned earlier. Inside the envelope was also a printed schedule. Hassan was listed as a guest speaker during the opening ceremony. He looked at the paper for a long time, speaking at a royal event. It sounded unbelievable. Just days ago, he was being questioned in silence. Now, they were asking him to stand before hundreds of people and speak. But it wasn't about pride or attention for him. He understood something deeper. This was a chance to clear the air, not just for himself, but for anyone who had ever been misunderstood or wrongly judged. It was a chance to show how calmness, truth, and dignity could rise above confusion. He agreed to attend. Over the next few days, the palace staff stayed in touch with him. They arranged for transportation, sent him clothing options for the event, and even offered to prepare his speech. But Hassan politely refused the last offer. "I will write my own words," he said. "They must come from the heart." In the evenings, after Amir went to sleep, Hassan sat quietly at his desk and wrote in his notebook. He thought about everything that had happened, the way the guards stayed silent, the long wait, the feeling of being watched. The moment Faisal arrived, and the relief when the truth was finally spoken. He didn't write with anger. He didn't want revenge. He simply wanted to tell the truth, to share his journey, and to remind people that mistakes can happen. But what matters is how we correct them. The day of the event arrived. The palace was decorated with lights and flowers. Important guests from across the country were arriving: ministers, artists, scholars, and members of the royal family. There were traditional songs playing softly in the background, and the smell of fresh flowers filled the air. Hassan arrived in a simple but elegant outfit. He held Amir's hand as they walked past the tall palace gates. Many people turned to look at him, some whispering, others nodding with respect. They had read the news. They had seen the photo Layla posted. Now they were seeing the man in person. Inside the large hall, a long red carpet led to the stage. Chairs were arranged neatly, and the walls were covered with photos of the country's history. It was a celebration of the past, something Hassan had always loved. He was guided to a special seat in the front row. Faisal met him with a warm handshake. "Are you ready?" Faisal asked. "As ready as I'll ever be." Hassan replied with a calm smile. The ceremony began with traditional music and short speeches from palace officials. Then the host announced, "Please welcome a man whose voice has guided many through the halls of our history, who stood with patience when others would have shouted. Let us hear his story." There was soft applause as Hassan walked to the stage. He stood at the podium, looked at the crowd, and took a deep breath. He began speaking slowly, clearly. "I was arrested without a word," he said, "and I waited, not knowing why. Many people would feel angry, many would shout. But I chose to remain still, not because I was afraid, but because I believed the truth would speak in time." He paused for a moment, letting his words settle in the air. "I'm not here to blame anyone. I'm here to share what I've learned." In that quiet room, I remembered every lesson my parents taught me: to stay honest, to stay kind, to stay hopeful. And those lessons helped me walk through confusion with calmness. He looked toward the royal family, then at the security officials seated nearby. "To those who arrested me, I don't hold any hate. You followed what you believed to be right. But I hope we all remember, a small mistake can hurt someone deeply, and a simple act of understanding can heal much more." He then spoke about his love for history, his small tours, and the way he tried to make the past come alive for children, travelers, and elders alike. "I believe history isn't just old stories," he said. "It's a mirror. It shows us how to be better today." When he finished, the room was silent for a moment, not because people were unsure, but because they were moved. Then came the applause, long, respectful, and full of warmth. After the speech, many guests came to meet him. Some thanked him. Others shared their own stories of being misunderstood. One elderly man said, "You didn't just speak for yourself today. You spoke for all of us." Amir stood proudly beside his father, holding his hand tightly, smiling. As people took photos and praised his dad, Even members of the royal family came forward to thank Hassan. One of the princesses told him, "You have taught us more than any book ever could." Later, Layla came to meet him too. She had a notepad in hand, but she didn't ask too many questions. "I just want to thank you," she said. "Hi, your story helped many people look at things differently." Hassan nodded. Sometimes silence teaches more than noise. And sometimes a small truth lights up a large room. As the event came to an end, Faisal walked him to the exit gate. "You've changed something today," Faisal said. "You may not see it now, but hearts have shifted." Hassan looked up at the evening sky, stars beginning to appear. "I didn't want to change anything," he said. "I only wanted to tell the truth." With Amir beside him and peace in his heart, Hassan walked out of the palace, not as a victim of a mistake, but as a symbol of patience, dignity, and quiet strength. And far away, in homes, schools, and offices, people remembered his story, not because it was loud, but because it was real. After the cultural event at the palace, Hassan's life slowly began to settle back into a peaceful rhythm, but with a new sense of purpose. The experience had changed him in many ways. He realized that sometimes life brings unexpected challenges, and how a person reacts to these challenges can make all the difference. Hassan was no longer just a tour guide sharing stories of the past. He was a living example of patience, truth, and kindness. News of Hassan's story spread far beyond the city. Newspapers wrote about the man who stayed calm, even when wrongly accused. Schools invited him to talk to students about history and honesty. People from nearby villages reached out to learn about his work. And little Amir was proud to say, "My father is a hero because he never gave up." One morning, while Hassan was preparing for another tour, his phone rang. It was Faisal. "Hassan," he said, "I have some good news for you." Hassan smiled. "Tell me." "The palace wants to support your work. They are setting up a special program for storytellers like you. They want to help spread our culture through your voice. They've even offered to help you get better equipment and a place to hold your tours." Hassan was surprised and touched, which was more than he expected. "It's wonderful news," he said humbly. "But why would they do this?" Faisal laughed softly. "Because your story showed them the value of kindness and calmness. You reminded them what really matters." Hassan thought of his journey, from the moment the royal guards arrested him in silence, to the time Faisal arrived, and everything changed, to standing on that stage and sharing his truth with hundreds of people. Each moment had taught him something important. He thought of the silence of the guards at the beginning. It had been frightening and confusing, but then came the arrival of backup Faisal, who brought clarity and justice. This change had made all the difference. Hassan wanted others to learn this too, that silence can be hard, but it does not always mean harm. Sometimes it is just a space waiting for the right moment to speak the truth. Over the next few weeks, Hassan began the new program with the help of the palace. He traveled to schools, community centers, and even hospitals. He shared stories of history, culture, and hope. He encouraged people to listen carefully, to be patient, and to seek understanding before judging. In every place he went, Hassan carried a small photo in his wallet, the one Faisal had shown him of the real suspect. It reminded him how easy it is to make mistakes and how important it is to stay calm and fair. One day, a young woman approached him after a talk. She said, "Your story helped me understand my own family better. We often rush to conclusions, but now I want to listen more." Hassan smiled warmly. That's the first step toward peace. At home, Amir was growing quickly. He loved hearing his father's stories and sometimes helped him prepare for his talks. Together, they made plans for a small library in their neighborhood where children could come and learn about their heritage. The neighborhood began to change. People who once ignored Hassan now stopped to say hello. His children waited eagerly for his visits. Even the local shopkeepers joined in, offering snacks during his storytelling sessions. One evening, Hassan received a letter from the chief of security at the palace. It thanked him again for his patience and courage. It also mentioned a special award to be given to him at the next national celebration, an honor not just for his work, but for the way he handled difficult moments with dignity. Hassan was humbled. He never wanted fame or awards, but he accepted the honor as a symbol of hope that calmness and truth can win over misunderstanding. When the day of the national celebration arrived, Hassan and Amir attended the ceremony with Faisal. The hall was filled with applause as Hassan was called to the stage to receive his award. He looked out at the crowd and remembered the long journey, the silence, the confusion, the backup, and the change. He spoke again, this time with confidence and joy. Thank you for this honor. I hope my story reminds us all that even in silence, we can find strength. Even in mistakes, there's a chance to learn. And most importantly, that kindness and patience can bring light to the darkest moments. The crowd stood and clapped, some wiping tears from their eyes. After the ceremony, many came to congratulate him. One young boy said, "I want to be like you when I grow up, calm and brave." Hassan smiled and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You already have it inside you." As the years passed, Hassan continued his work. The mistake that had once threatened to break him had instead built a new path filled with hope and understanding. He and Amir lived a happy life, surrounded by friends, neighbors, and the stories that connected them all. And whenever Hassan thought back to that day when the royal guards said nothing, he remembered how everything changed when backup arrived, not just in the palace, but in his heart and the hearts of those around him. Because sometimes silence waits not for fear, but for the right moment to speak the truth and bring light.